I was just telling everybody we had 120 people register for this. I don't know how many will actually come, but it looks like we're up to about 43 right now. So obviously people are feeling like they need to get together, they need to talk, and they need to hash through some of these things. I do want to start though, I think, with Cameron Brooks. We posted in the community a couple of days ago some work Cameron's been doing on just DISPs, DISP, which stands for what? Distributed. I always forget what that stands for. Cameron, what is it again?
Distributed system plans
Distributed
or
system.
distribution system planning.
Yeah. So Cameron's doing some interesting work there. So I did ask him to just speak about it for a couple of minutes, and that sort of will get us primed to start our discussion here. So Cameron, it's
Well,
all yours.
great. Thank you, Lisa. And I appreciate, as always, the chance to be here and collaborate with you and others. Really interested to hear thoughts. So, my name's Cameron Brooks. I lead a research and advisory firm called E9 Insight. And we really spend a lot of our time understanding and diving into the regulatory record and then putting that into context so that we can use it to inform business strategy or advocacy strategy. And in some ways, it sort of strikes me as a little bit funny, the question posed for this conversation, how to position distributed energy resources, almost as though it needs some kind of marketing campaign for distributed energy, which, in many venues it does. But there's also some fundamental truths that maybe are worth observing right here at the beginning, because it's a fact that the incremental cost of producing an electron is going down, and the incremental cost of storing an electron is going down. But it's also a fact that the incremental cost of distributing electrons is going up, at least under most of the current regulatory model that's in operation for most utilities. So there's this fundamental challenge that's really not rooted in policy, but it's rooted in physics, it's rooted in technology, and the fundamentals of distributed energy are only going stronger. So it seems to me that we're entering this phase where people are going to make very self-interested investments, families, businesses, communities that want to de-risk their exposure to things like extreme weather, rising utility costs, monopolistic behavior that might try to limit what they're allowed to do. And I see that they're going to be investing in these technologies that they own, that they control, and that they can then optimize. And I'd say in some ways, they alone can optimize to meet their own needs, but also bring value to the grid. So I think we're going to be living in a very DER rich world very soon. But it kind of comes back to the motivating question behind this conversation of, well, what does that look like? So one of the observations that I just wanted to offer, I mean, rate cases really define what customers are going to pay at the end of the day. For years, many states have used integrated resource plans or IRPs as a strategic planning framework to really look at their bulk power system. But more recently, there are distribution system plans that commissions and states are establishing as a venue to understand what the DER landscape looks like right now, what investments are going to be needed to support DER, and how the utility system is poised to take advantage of the new complexity, sure, but also the new capabilities that are available at the grid edge. So over 20 states, which is a good number, but obviously not all, have established a distribution system planning process. And that really reflects a growing recognition of the need for some kind of holistic approach to what are the investment strategies in the distribution system to, again, match or meet this moment of increasing complexity, but also increasing capability. We spend a lot of time looking at these. We've done a lot of deep dive research about, what different states are doing, what are some of the components. And we think it's an opportunity for this community to bring attention to the distribution planning processes, and not only the ones that exist, but also then to really help shape what they could look like with what I would hope would be a very clear-eyed pragmatism around, what works, what are some of the facts on the ground, where can distributed energy play a role in supporting the grid, where is it going to have impacts that need to be mitigated, and making that a much more public, open process that we can all engage in. So appreciate the opportunity, Elisa, just to kind of highlight this thing that we've been spending a lot of time looking at, and would love to think about ways that this community could, work together and collaborate to bring more attention and just to understand better what's happening at the state commissions in this regard. So thank you, Elisa. I think I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks, Cameron. Very interesting. Are there any particular issues that around distributed planning that we should be thinking about? Like, are there any like major focal points right now that are worrying you or that you're?
Well, a lot of things worry me. I'm probably a little anxiety prone that way. But, I think really one of the things that is key is the amount of visibility and transparency. And so, the idea of distribution system planning ties in very closely with things like hosting capacity maps to understand, which circuits can accommodate more distributed energy. As I said before, where is there going to be value? Where might energy storage support the needs of the grid? Where might it bring impacts? I think there's always this tension within the utility regulatory world about what information is available to the broader market. And so that's something that I think certainly worries me. There's certainly some proposals right now that catch my eye about utilities, for example, really promoting distributed energy. But most of those don't actually establish, they don't address kind of the fundamental question of if the utility knows, as they should, where these impacts are going to manifest or where the benefits are needed, then that should be made available to the market in some kind of open, transparent way, as opposed to being another thing that is kind of held behind the utility walls. That's my personal opinion, but I think we see that as well as one of the motivating factors behind the distribution system planning processes. How do we make this information available in a way that can really take advantage of what's out there?
Thank you, Cameron. That was very interesting. A couple of people have raised their hands. I see Barry Cinnamon. Barry?
Yes, hi. Cameron, that was really interesting. I'm glad you're kind of focusing on this. When I look at the cost of electrons, to me, from an overall standpoint, when we're talking about new generation, the farther away that the generation source is from the use, the more those electrons cost. And that's, for wind, that's for solar, that's for nuclear, because you're not going to be building new nuclear plants. It's for geothermal. Just the farther away, the more it costs. And at the risk of dating myself, we have the technology to do these DERs very easily. That's a $6 million man reference. But there's regulatory capture that's completely hamstrung that issue here in California. And I'm wondering what we can do about the regulatory capture. And it's beyond just the regulators, it's the governor and it's the legislature. So pretty much every effort to come up with DERs that would make economic sense is hamstrung by policymakers.
Well, first of all, I appreciate the $6 million man reference. That was an after school ritual for me to watch that. So, but look, I couldn't agree more about the cost of the electron and needing to be transmitted or distributed. And I'll add on to that. I would say those electrons end up becoming much riskier as well. There's so many points of failure along the way, the further away you get. And really, if you're looking for resilience, there's no way to really do that except to have some kind of on-site technology that allows you to ride through some kind of disruption. Of course, how long and using what is an open question. Man, I wish that I had the answer to this question of regulatory capture and the fundamental tension that I think distributed energy represents to the model as we've established it today. I mean, it seems to me that a rate-based model for a regulated utility made sense at one point, but right now it's not actually helping us. It's a perverse incentive that it is premised on economies of scale, in my opinion, that just simply don't exist anymore and probably haven't existed for many, many decades. Again, I wish I knew the exact answer. I think that conversations like this and forums like this, where it can be brought out and brought some visibility, you know, I mean, I don't know who would be credited with the phrase, but you know, sunshine is really the best disinfectant. And so bringing some transparency and even just bringing some transparency to how that influence is exerted is really valuable. I know there are some states that are taking reasonably I don't know if aggressive is exactly the right word, but you know, are looking at this and trying to rein in the ability for utilities to use ratepayer money, especially to promote things that, you know, are in their interest, but might not be in the ratepayers' interests. Again, I wish I had the answer, but it's clear that that elephant in the room needs to be called out often, early and often.
Thank you, Cameron. Very good points. And that is the big, big question. So I've got 3 more people with their hands raised. Action, Akam, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right. Then Brooke, then Myron.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hope you can hear me. Is that correct?
Can hear you.
Oh, great. Yeah, I wanted to draw your attention to a legislative initiative here in Utah. In Europe, plug-in solar has quadrupled during the past year in terms of connecting solar resources to the grid via a plug. And they're just plugging it in, and there's no need to obtain an interconnect agreement. And we're in Salt Lake City right now. We're meeting with the advanced legislators here in Utah. And it turns out they're Republicans. They are really advancing the renewable energy regulatory world with a much more ambitious pace than we would expect from the former leaders of renewable energy in California. Yeah, if you want to check out the links that I put in there. I am with Gizmo Power. We're a company who's involved in doing powerful plug-in solar. We have 2 interconnect agreements with the utilities so far, one of them in South Dakota with La Creek Electric. And then we passed also plan review and safety inspection in Nevada, in Las Vegas with Nevada Energy. And we feel that the positioning of DERs should very much focus on also easing the interconnect procedures for small and medium generators onto the grid. There's no technical or scientific need to re-study an interconnect, and for such small resources, they can be among the non-controlled interconnectors. And this is a very important point. There's a massive potential for interconnecting smaller resources to the grid, and it should not be controlled by the utilities. The advanced step that the regulators take here in Utah is they are really dismissing the utility from being in the process of interconnecting. So there's no more interconnect agreement. If you follow the link that I put in there, it's totally amazing. I'm really in awe of their regulatory initiative, and yeah, just check it out. And yeah, I wanted to just throw it in here. Thank you so much.
What are the size of those projects? I think I missed it.
Is that a question for me? I mean,
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes,
yeah,
what
yeah.
you mentioned your 2 projects. How big are they?
Well, we are basically the in Europe, the law was written for 800 watt balcony solar systems. Utah went for 1,200 watts at half the voltage. That is very significant. It is per phase. So people who are familiar with the laws of electricity see that there's a really big potential there. Our systems are actually 5 kilowatt. We can act up to 9.72 right now. But we are on a dedicated line. We are on a 240 volt, which can carry really a very powerful system. This basically the size of a rooftop system that we interconnect by means of a plug. And we have shared basically our circuit diagrams with the public, their public domain, and yeah, we're happy to work with everybody who wants to grab for the stars with us. Thank you.
That's great. That's great. Wonderful. Okay, I think that Brooke was next, then Myron, if I'm following the pattern here correctly.
Bill would like to speak as well, Elisa, sorry.
Yep, and I see Erica too. Fantastic.
Right. So kind of going back to California here, I'm also in California.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I forgot to ask everybody, please just tell us your name and also what you do or who you're with, just because not everybody, a lot of new people are here today, so.
Sure. I'm a master's student at UC Berkeley studying energy policy. Happy to be here. And I know we've, had a pretty high penetration of solar and distributed solar into the market, so much that it actually, congests the grid at some points during undesirable times of day. We have that really bad duck curve here. And so batteries seem to be the answer to this, storage. But we still have such a high cost per kilowatt hour for batteries, right? So how are you guys thinking about, how we're going to bring that cost per kilowatt hour down for batteries, how we're going to increase the penetration of batteries into, the DER systems, because that seems to be a really crucial part here. And I'm not sure that I agree that, the utilities here just want to push out solar and push out DERs, but I think we're really starting to see a reckoning with, how do we integrate these resources in a really balanced and sustainable way that actually works for the grid. So I'm curious your thoughts on that, Cameron or Elisa. Yeah.
That's a great question. Before we get to Myron, Erica, and Bill, does anybody want to answer that question? Myron does, and he's next, so that's perfect. Go for it, Myron.
And I live in New Orleans. Unlike almost every other state, the city of New Orleans regulates its own utilities, even though we do have a state commission. In 2015, I invented electricity rate design, which is bi-directional, highly time varying, and the utility, of course, killed it because they wanted to build a gas peaking plant. But we currently in New Orleans have a DER docket, and we're studying it. A contingent of the good guys want to put batteries in homes only with solar, and we think we should be flexing all distributed energy resources, including water heaters and air conditioners, and et cetera. And we think it's 10 times the bang for the buck. So to answer the question that Brooke asked, in our opinion, the answer is rates. However, our allies who are competitors in the docket want to do aggregated control, which is what the utility is all geared up for. And we're very much opposed to aggregated control. According to studies that are made available to Lawrence Berkeley Lab, the aggregator eats up half the income as the cost of running the aggregation, which is a big waste of money. And to answer Brooke's question, what pays for the batteries? Well, the rates pay for batteries. In New Orleans, we experience wholesale prices that vary to below 2 cents a kilowatt hour to over $2 a kilowatt hour on the same day. And so if the retail prices reflected the wholesale prices, even 50% or 20% or whatever, you would pay for batteries very rapidly, even if you don't have solar panels. So that's the answer. And it also doesn't have to be orchestrated. You may need a little bit of the utility doing something to accommodate aberrant conditions. But I'm a mathematician, and when you add up a lot of random numbers, you get a really nice, consistent average pretty easily. Another thing that batteries do is, I was told this by Kay Aiken, who's a member of Electricity Brain Trust, pointed out that the latest standard in California is that the batteries will, sitting on the grid, will automatically solve frequency regulation problems and voltage problems just because they're there. If they have any energies at all, they can fix these problems for the grid. So we don't need to have aggregated control to reach our solution. It's more expensive, less effective. The right way to pay for batteries is let the customer buy them and pay for them out of the rates. That's my opinion. But I want to add one more thing to this discussion, which is I think people are overlooking community solar. It is the distributed energy resource, as is energy efficiency. And I know how to integrate them and put them into the grid in a dynamic fashion, which sounds counterintuitive, but it should be in the set of DERs as well. So that's probably more time than I have to write. But anyway, you asked me for introduction. I am the Senior Vice President of Prorate Energy, a nonprofit in New Orleans. And I've been working on utility regulation problems for 40 years, trying to solve the climate problem. Thank you for letting me talk.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Myron. Brooke, did that answer your question?
Yeah, that was very insightful. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, Erica.
Thank you very much. I'm here. A good follow-up right now to Myron. I hope you can see and hear me.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
we can hear you.
Great. Myron, hi. VP of Operations for Gizmo Power. Achim is my right-hand person, or he's my right. Either way, our daughter is the CEO and patent holder for our solution. As far as community solar goes, there's a place for everything when we talk about everything being on the table. Community solar allows their subscribers to have a minimal amount of 15%, 20% off of their bill. Somebody else still owns that generation. Somebody still can raise rents. Somebody still is controlling. And our motto at this point is, if you can plug in, if you can own your own generation, that is economically interesting for the individual who owns that generator. It also has really a lot of other benefits for resilience. Yes, one of the things that has been very frustrating for us, of course, is we just got into the ACOR program, which is the American Council on Renewable Energy. It is a Justice 40 initiative designed for underserved, underprivileged, historically marginalized, all of that stuff, which is now being thrown out. And now we're being forced to find other ways to discuss people who've been left out. There are the powers that be and those who have not. And however ways that we're going to be discussing it, our approach, and I'd love to hear how other people see this, is if you can get a 240 volt split phase plug under your control, whether you're a renter or not, and you have a sunny spot, you can generate your own electricity, which is ultimately the ROI for the owner. Not for some aggregator, not for a distributor, not for a soft cost, not for a permit, not for delivery, not for transmission, not for anything. And that is our goal. So thank you for letting me talk. And we're looking for more partners. We're looking for, yes, all we are a deployment method where we don't create panels, we don't create the components. This is a new way for us to look at generation as an appliance, not a project. Projects are over. They're appliances and we can own them. Thank you.
I gotta say, that's really fascinating. And you have I was sitting here thinking, well, I kind of directed you all to talk about the states, but I really did want to get into what's happening on the federal level too. And you brought us into it. And I saw a quote the other day. I posted this in our community because it really struck me as you mentioned justice for all, solar for all. This was in a local newspaper. It's from Indiana, and it was about the Solar for All funding. And it quotes a Republican lawmaker, state lawmaker, who described himself as pro-solar. And here's what he said. He said, I've had a number of the solar utility companies in his office, and many instances, and in many instances, they are saying that the tax rebates and other federal funding are nice, but the industry has matured quite a bit, to the extent that they will still have enough profit margin without it. Then he goes on to say, what's shaking out is that commercial solar, and I think he means utility scale solar, commercial solar is advancing far more than rooftop equivalent. We can't run a manufacturing plant on rooftop solar panels. This struck me because I said, aha, is this the messaging that we're going to be hearing? I mean, we've kind of always heard that to some degree, but is this those folks out there, who are kind of pushing this new federal agenda? Is this where they're going? Yeah, solar's great, but what you're doing, just too small, not going to work, kind of just, not dealing with any of the other benefits that you just spoke about, just forgetting those, not even getting into it. So I'd be really curious what you all think about that, and kind of what to do with it and how to counter it. And I think you brought up some really, really good points. But next of all, Bill has been waiting, Bill Prindle, and you have worked on all levels, Bill Prindle. You've worked on state, you've worked on federal, and you've done it for a long time. So I really want to hear what you're thinking.
Yeah, I'm thinking a little more broadly about the whole outlook for DER in this new political era. My main federal concern is what is FERC going to do? Because 20 years ago, I worked with FERC Chair John Wellinghoff, who is a DSM advocate. There's never been anyone quite like him at FERC. He personally, I will say, or urged is a polite word, PJM and other RTOs to get serious about demand response. And without that kind of pressure, I don't think we would have seen the demand response markets that evolved. And that also paved the way for FERC to do other things like Order 2222 for virtual power plants and so on. I'm concerned that FERC's going to back off on that, and that RTOs and the other organized markets will say, well, we don't really have to push it that hard. So we'll see how that all plays out. Hopefully the stakeholders will see the wisdom of a balanced resource mix. But to the distribution system planning issue, and Cameron was very helpful in teeing that up at the beginning. I've worked on a few utility distribution planning efforts. Footnote, I've worked for ICF, one of the major consultancies, for 17 years. I'm part-time now. I also have my own consultancy. So the DSPs that I've seen have been, they've acknowledged DER, and, some of those utilities have done a fair amount. But I also observe, and I think others would have more expert commentary, that it's a very data-intensive analytics effort to do a really thorough DER distribution planning analysis. You need a lot of data down at the individual feeder and circuit level. It's not cheap to do. It's not easy to get and use the data. So that's something that wasn't really such an issue with IRPs, which were up at the, more at the system level. So that's been a challenge. There's also, when a utility files a plan, if it's an investor-owned utility, they're looking for new assets, right? So there's inherently going to be an interest in utility-owned assets, at the front of the line. And there's a challenge for DER advocates to make their case that, well, actually, independently owned assets should be able to play. And, that'll play out differently in different states. Different regulators will be, differently disposed to that. But the last issue that I wanted to raise is on the valuation of DER and other demand side assets. So, you know, at the distribution level, when you can only value a certain fraction of the value stack, how regulators treat that valuation question is hugely important. And I just wanted to make a plug, and I put a link in the chat for the National Energy Screening Project. I have colleagues who work on that, and they've been evolving really thoughtful, well-grounded standard practice methods for doing DER evaluation, and some states are taking that up. I think that's really where the action is going to be state by state, is for folks in this business to really move forward the whole process of how do you value DERs. I'll just say that I'm a Dominion Energy Demand Response participant, and I just remotely deposited my $10 check for last year. You know, and I have to say, I appreciate the $10, but the average customer is like, what? You know, I get $10 Groupon coupons 5 a week. You know, what do I care? So for a mass market kind of approach, you know, there's going to have to be more incentives offered to really get mass participation in DER. And I'll just, with that little anecdote, I'll leave it at that.
So it sounds like you're saying that distribution system planning really is dependent on getting value of DER correct first. Is that, am I understanding you correctly?
Yeah, I think so. That's one of the key pieces. It's not the only piece. And there are more expert folks in this call who could speak to that, I think.
Maybe we'll grab Cameron again to talk about that. But
Yeah,
first,
yeah.
but Emerson, you've been waiting. Your turn. Emerson, you're on mute. Nope. I'm trying to unmute you, but nothing's happening. I'm not sure what's going on. Okay, why don't we jump to someone else? Emerson, if you can get yourself off mute, please just come on back in again. We want to hear from you. Okay, Russell, then Ackham.
Hi, everybody. So what I'm wondering is, what are the actual ways, the specific actions that can promote DER, which I think we're all wondering, what are the best, of all the different techniques? And from my perspective, which may be biased, my name is Russell Lowe's. I'm with Arizonans for Community Choice, which promotes community choice energy or aggregation, as they call it in California. It seems like a community choice aggregation is one of the best ways in which to promote DER, because cities are basically going with community choice energy to promote solar energy to convert very quickly, because it's cheaper, because it meets their climate action plans, because it reduces the amount of water from power plants, and over 90% of the expansion of these cities is DER or centralized power purchase agreements. So it seems like that's a really good emphasis to promote in the DER movement. And I'm not sure it's getting enough. It takes state authorization, and we have 11 states now that have authorized it, and about 1 out of 10 people in the entire United States are under a CCE or CCA, community choice aggregation or energy. So I'm just wondering how many people here are involved in promoting CCE, or are there other techniques that are more specifically promotional of DER than community choice energy? Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. And also, if you follow our podcast, Russell did a great one talking about what's happening in Arizona, if you want more details on that one.
Thanks.
Okay, Ackham.
Yeah, thank you for having me again. I wanted to thank William for putting in a plug in the chat. So that's, we take it a little more literal. I wanted to also bring up that we already have two grid impact analysis studies from national research laboratories. One of them in North Carolina from Freedom Systems Center at North Carolina State University. And also SLAC National Accelerator Laboratory just basically completed a grid impact analysis and validated the NCSU study. So we have all the scientific backing that this is what it is, and it's not really another hoax. You know, I wanted to kind of offer this. The studies are available on our website. If you scroll down and to the nerdy details, there's links to it, and it has the circuit diagrams on it. They simulated basically a market penetration from 0 to 100% without batteries at this point. Obviously, if you have like battery resources at the same time, that will also impact the duck curve significantly. Thank you.
Thank you. Lorenzo, I love your new photo.
Thanks. That was a little ceramic sculpture I got as a present, and I thought, oh, that would make a really good Zoom avatar. Great discussion, everyone. I really am appreciating all the things brought up today. So I have a couple of responses to specifics that I'm very interested in. One is that I really endorse the point made by the folks from Gizmo about ownership, that the value of DERs is not only decentralizing the technology, but decentralizing the ownership of the assets. And how we build wealth in the economy we live in is we own assets that are productive and that produce value and that that can generate revenues. And to me, that's an intimate element of how we deal with economic justice or environmental justice. It really is enabling local communities and others, tribes, local co-ops, et cetera, to own the assets, to generate revenues, and to own the revenues, and to own the energy that's being produced. So along those lines, I'm concerned about a recent proposal that I think was filed by Xcel Energy in Minnesota, something that's now going under the acronym DCP, Distributed Capacity Procurement. It's gaining some interesting attention, at least in Minnesota, maybe elsewhere. And it's about enabling the utility to own distributed energy resources for the sake of essentially proliferating DERs. And it strikes me that, you know, that's looking at DERs as a valuable way to decentralize the technology, but without decentralizing the ownership. And if we really want a transformative energy system that's going to benefit all communities, we've got to decentralize the ownership. So keep your eyes out for DCP. I believe the latest in Minnesota is this was brought up in an IRP, and the IRP decision will come out pretty soon, next 2-3 months. But Xcel is being directed to issue a more detailed proposal by next October. So that'll be a work in process in Minnesota, but I expect it'll come up elsewhere as well. To the question about DSP and distributed system planning, something I've been thinking about a lot, and in fact, recently just wrote a book chapter, which will come out in the next couple of months, about bottom-up resource planning. And I think going back to the idea of local ownership and local benefits, the notion being that forever, city planners don't think about energy. They think about zoning and land use and developments and maybe mobility and building codes and so on, but they don't do energy because the utility does that. And I think that needs to change. I think given that cities and counties have climate action plans, et cetera, and think about how they're going to grow economic development, energy needs to be part of local planning. And so I would start from the idea that I'm promoting in this chapter is you start from the principle of supply energy as close to the use as possible, as close to the need as possible. So you start from a local first priority, and you put that in the hands of the local based organizations that see locally owned energy as providing revenues and wealth building in their communities and so on. And then along that line, the Energy Commission in California has last year opened up a proceeding on non-energy impacts. This was a response to a Center for Biological Diversity petition that numerous other parties signed on to that said, look, state, you're supposed to consider costs and benefits when you're making resource and investment decisions. Then you should be looking at all the costs and benefits, not just the conventional ones. And all of them means things like land use impacts and local resilience and local health benefits and so on. And so the commission wisely opened up a proceeding. They're having a second all-day workshop on March 13th. It's moving slowly, but it's moving. And they're looking at exactly this question. How do we value all of the things that DERs can offer when we're making these kinds of resource and planning decisions? So thanks for that. And then one last point. Sorry for going on so long, but I wanted to respond on community choice energy. The big limitation that we see in California with community choice energy, many of those agencies have been doing good work, but when it comes down to local energy, they don't have control over the utility wires. And that's the big barrier. If you want to build a local resource, you've got to move the power locally to serve local customers. And actually using the utility-owned wires becomes the main barrier here. So that's all. Thanks all for letting me go on. I hope that was helpful.
That was really helpful. That kind of underscored what I was trying to make when I read that Indiana quote, that legislator focused on one benefit, or in his case, non-benefit, as he saw it, of DERs, which was they're not big enough. 200 megawatts is better than 1 megawatt, basically. And I think that is really, what you said is really important, because I think that's what often gets missed, that there are many benefits to DERs, and that needs to be brought out more. I guess that's the point I wanted to make. So thank you for that. You did bring them out. Wonderful. Okay, I'm not sure who was next. It was either Brooke or Acom. I'm not sure. I think it was Brooke. Sorry. I'm sorry if I'm wrong. Brooke, why don't you go next? I think you have a question.
Sure. Yeah, one more question for everyone. Regarding DERs, and planning, you hear conversations back and forth about, the growth of DERs could actually offset the need to really expand our distribution systems really expensively. And then on the other hand, you hear actually we're going to see so much load growth due to AI and, whatever it is, that we're going to need both. We're going to need increased centralized distribution systems as well as increased DER. Does anyone have an informed opinion on this, or resources to share, data, actually taking a look at load growth and this topic?
Anybody want to take that? Lorenzo, do you want to jump in on that again?
Could you clarify the question again? I'm sorry that I didn't quite get it.
Sure. Yeah, so I hear differing opinions on, a big value of growing the penetration of DERs is that we may not have to expand our distribution systems as much, which is very, very expensive. And then on the other hand, I hear actually we are going to need an all of the above approach, because we're going to see a lot of load growth, especially from AI. So y'all think we need all of the above? You think we can do it with just DER? Do you have sources to share?
Well, I'll offer a couple of opinions on that, and others may differ, but basically I would never claim that over the next 5-10 years, we're going to meet all of our electricity supply with DERs. But what I do advocate, and this comes back to the idea of bottom-up resource planning, is you start from where the loads are and you build as much supply close to load as possible. And then the bulk power system, the utility system, becomes the residual supply. We start to look at that in the perspective of being residual supply, where we're meeting as much as possible locally first. And that leads to different planning regimes. You're going to plan differently at, say, the ISO level, at the transmission level, for utility scale resources and transmission lines, if you have a regime that's effective at building supply close to load as a starting place. So, so I would start there. And all of the above, I'm hesitant about that phrase, because it typically means everything, where everything includes like nuclear plants that may be 20 years in the future, and other things that I don't consider to be an all of the above strategy in a time when there is some urgency about moving to cleaner and more local energy. So anyway, a couple of thoughts. I hope that helps.
I heard somebody say about all of the above that it's kind of nonsensical, because you can't possibly plan for all energy sources. There are limited resources. We have limited amount of money. We have limited everything so it's always a matter of prioritizing. So anyway, just a thought. Okay, so I think if I've got it correctly this time, I'm sorry. I think it was Acom, Russell, and Barry. So Acom.
Yeah, I just have a quick pointer here that I wanted to share. There was some statements about that small distributed energy resources like rooftop do not really can't run a factory. There is data about this happening actually in South Australia. Australia has an extremely high rooftop penetration, and they run the whole area on rooftop pretty much. And there is data already available in South Australia. So I think, Elisa, that was you. You were confronted by some lawmaker who said, "Oh, this doesn't really work." So the data exists. I think you have to Google it. I don't have really something I can put in the chat. So I just wanted to give you some support for your discussions there. Thanks.
Thank you. That's helpful. I appreciate that. Okay, Russell and Barry.
Well, in response to Brooke's question about all of the above, and also kind of echoing Lorenzo to some extent, there's what's called opportunity cost. And opportunity cost is, say like if you spend $1 on new nuclear energy, you'll get 3.5 kilowatt hours out of that dollar, because it costs about 28.5 cents per kilowatt hour for the Vogtle nuclear reactors that just were completed. So they're about 28.5 cents. That's 3.5 kilowatt hours per dollar that you spend. But if you spend $1 on solar with robust battery backup, according to the Lawrence Berkeley Lab spreadsheets, there are now about 4 cents per kilowatt hour for the production, or for the pre-delivery cost. So when you add the typical 6 cents per kilowatt hour delivery cost onto that, you get 10 cents per kilowatt hour for solar versus 3.5 or 28.85 cents per kilowatt hour. So when you spend the dollar on it, you get 10 kilowatt hours. The 10 kilowatt hours minus the 3.5 that you would have gotten from nuclear creates a 6.5 cents opportunity cost. It means now that you have to go out and buy that on the grid, 6.5 cents or kilowatt hours, sorry, you have to buy that on the grid, or you have to do energy efficiency, or you have to do without. And it doesn't make any sense, because when you buy the power on the grid, well, guess what? Our grid is 75% fossil fuel. So 75% of that 6.5 opportunity cost comes down to 4.9 kilowatt hours that you're going to have to buy from that's fossil fuel, more than what you got out of the dollar from the nuclear, which is 3.5. It's like absurd to go with all of the above approach, because when you spend $1 on nuclear, you could have gotten 10 kilowatt hours from solar and energy and battery backup. And so you're basically wiping out the power that you could have gotten when you spend money on expensive things like carbon capture and sequestration and like nuclear energy. And if you take it on a transportation level, like ethanol corn, was ethanol based on corn is incredibly expensive and environmentally destructive to boot. So yes, you do not want to do all of the above. You want to do what makes sense. You want to do what makes what is in the bottom 1/3 of cost instead of the top third of cost, like nuclear and carbon capture and sequestration.
Yeah, so I definitely made a mistake by using the phrase all of the above, because I'm not talking about all of these generation sources in terms of fossil fuels and bioenergy and all of that. I suppose like there's a big debate going on right now about cost shifting and these fixed costs that utility companies have to put into their rates when they're designing them. And this conversation around grid defection, all of these fixed costs being shifted to those that are still consuming electricity from the grid. And there's this debate around, these fixed costs aren't really that high because we're not going to need to build out as much distribution because we're offsetting that with DER adoption. So this is more what I was curious about, is in regards to like planning. There must be like some good data and good modeling out there to see like under different scenarios how much like distribution growth and centralized generation growth can't be offset by DER adoption. Yeah, so that's more where I was coming from with that. But thank you all for sharing your perspectives.
It sounds like it was something maybe if it's out there, one of the national labs would have probably done. I don't know if there's anybody aware of any studies like that, modeling like that.
Well,
Sorry, you've been waiting so patiently. Go.
No, I was just going to say, CALS has done a lot of research on this, and there's a recent report that came out from Robert McCann. But I wanted to get back first. I think it was I forgot who mentioned this, Russell or I think it might have been Russell. I think that the T&D costs, transmission and distribution costs in California, are over 20 cents a kilowatt hour. So, the DERs obviously can resolve that. But coming back to Brooke's original question of how much capacity we need, looking out over the next 10 years based on the expected demand load growth, we're going to need about 9 gigawatts of capacity in California every year for 10 years, especially as we look to if it ever goes through, the requirement that all vehicles are going to be fossil fuel free and we're going to completely electrify. So 9 gigawatts a year. Historically, rooftop solar has produced about 40% of that. Historically, the utility scale has been about 60. Now rooftop solar is down around 10% because of the changes to the net billing tariff and because of the reduction of the commercial market. So, it is really, really going to be a challenge to hit the needs of the capacity growth that California needs just on utility scale solar or other sources. And what's going to end up happening is we're going to end up putting in lots and lots of local natural gas plants or repowering existing nuke plants in California. So it's going to be tough, but I would suggest anybody and I'd be happy to find a link and post it to the recent CalSA study that talks about exactly these issues of the need for all of the above and the need for not suppressing the fastest way to generate this capacity, which is residential and especially commercial rooftop solar.
That's a huge point. I mean, I don't think we brought that up yet, that the speed that you can bring DERs on is just so different than utility scale. And it seems like speed right now is very important. Okay. Well, we are actually 1 minute over. I appreciate y'all staying. Anybody have any last minute comments they want to make? I thought we'd get more into the federal side. I was interested in hearing what people were experiencing with Solar for All money frozen and different things like that. So if anybody wants to jump into that in the last few minutes, Hikam?
I
wanted to point to the possibilities of using driveways at the same time. You know, it doesn't have to be on the roof, you know, so thanks. And there's a FERC order that really requires bidirectional power flow for all systems and regulation. It's the FERC order 2222, and that's been largely overlooked. And there's a lot of trouble with having bidirectional GFCI breakers being part of the National Electric Code. And there's a lot to discuss that hasn't really been brought up here in this discussion. And maybe that's going to be good for next time. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, Myron and Erica.
Yeah, just to add, I will be in DC next week for the ACOR Policy Forum. That's the American Council on Renewable Energy. I'm part of their accelerator there. And somebody mentioned this as being a community. I don't even know who we all are and what this is, but this is the start of a conversation. It's the first time I've been in a .com seminar with renewable sector folks, asking questions, having a free interaction of both utility interests and distributed interests. And I think I'd like to just say, I will take what happened here, bring it there, bring your questions. I think we all have questions about that solar for all. We all have questions about the GGRF funds, the ones they say they're trying to claw back. What's going to happen with the tax credits? Those are all big questions. And because we have decided to work with tribal nations as we move forward, they are one real big entity that was poised and set and signed and sealed and delivered to receive a big renewable shift. And right now, we're all not certain where that's going. I'm open for anybody who has any questions, can email Gizmo Power. I can bring them to the forum. And I look forward to the next time you're going to be organizing this, Alyssa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And if you want to learn more about us, you can go to our website, energychangemakers.com, and sign up for our newsletter. Myron, I'm sorry, you've been patient.
Okay, so I wanted to say, someone said the fastest way to get rooftop solar on the grid is to build more rooftop solar. No, that's not true. The fastest way is to invest in energy efficiency in people's homes. And we tend to think that's a dead end because we're all stuck with net energy metering and we can't get negative utility bills. But with my invention, which is rooftop community solar, where a three one-directional economic flows, the subscriber subscribes to an existing rooftop solar customer who then sells a percentage of their output to the grid, and then the utility gives a bill credit. But the rooftop solar customer can then invest in energy efficiency in their home. And these are the guys who can, because if they have enough money to put solar panels up, then they got plenty of money to invest in energy efficiency. And they did it a decade ago. There's lots of energy efficiency they haven't invested in. So the fastest way to get rooftop solar energy onto the grid is invest in energy efficiency in homes with existing solar panels. And there's 50 or to 100 megawatts just in New Orleans that are under outputting because they're stuck behind a net metering tariff, which doesn't let them output past zero. And we should get rid of that barrier. And we can do that with a progressive community solar rule. And that's how, as I was explaining before, community solar can become a DER.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's very helpful. Okay, so I just want to say to everybody too, I'm going to be moderating 2 panels next week at Intersolar in San Diego. So they're both on DERs. If any of you are going to be there, please come to them. They're on Wednesday. Great. Okay, I think that's it then. Thank you so much for coming. This was a really interesting discussion and there's more to come.